This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 975, recorded on Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. Is this the science awakening? I don't know, but I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with dwindling arousal, fewer rats, and rats proving nothing once again. But first, thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer. There is a difference between what people want and what they need. What we want, the thing, the object, the cool get, the big win, the enviable id, captured in an Insta post for all to see, for us to see, again, is a product. Manufactured moment of selfish glee, packaged, marketed, and delivered in a million purchasable forms. But what we need, what really drives a fulfilling human experience, is a much more elusive state of being. Science typically ignores what people want, instead focusing on the unmet need, the disease you don't have yet, the danger you don't know you are in, the catastrophes sneaking up on us all. Science is looking out for us. As we want this, nice to have that, the research goes on into what humanity actually needs to survive. To make it through a day or to overcome generational frailties, science is on the side of human need. And if you are ever in need, we want you to know science is here for you. On This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science, Yuki, and eventually Blair.
Blair will be joining us soon. Good science to you too, Justin. Almost Blair. And everyone out there, welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We are back again on our wonderful Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Pacific time, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. 5 a.m. Central Eastern.
European time.
Yeah. That.
Eastern time? Central European.
European. Yes. Okay. Yeah, wherever you are, we're there, right here, right now, right here, right now. We have a wonderful show ahead, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us for another week of science. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the day that this show is being live streamed and recorded on in the United States. This is Juneteenth, 19th of June, and it has a history, and it is becoming more visible as a celebration, as a holiday across the nation. However, it should always stand as a reminder of our all too recent history of slavery in the United States and the work still to be done as a society to face that history, to internalize how it shaped where we are now, and also to use that knowledge to create a future that's more inclusive and equitable. We're not there yet. Science also has its own skeletons to face, and it's going to be a long process. We have to acknowledge that. And here on TWIS, we do. But today is also a reminder that even though we're not there yet, we the people, can change things for the better. And yeah, we're going to be talking a lot in the next hour because this is a talk show and that's what we do. But really change starts by shutting up and listening to the people who have historically been silenced. All right. On this week's show, we have tons of science news. I have news stories about viral dysfunction, dwindling arousal. What does that mean? And the healing army inside us all. Justin.
Healing army seems
Yes.
almost contradictory. I've got killing rats to restore coral reefs, and how your cats could kill you with bird flu this time.
Oh no, come on. It's just one thing after another.
I'm telling you, cats, be careful.
Anybody, don't
Of
pet
them.
anybody. If you pet people, pet cats, just germs. Come on, everybody. Anyway, let's talk about that. I'm not going to ask Blair what is in Blair's Animal Corner because she is not here yet, but she, in her docket, has time for swimming, some cancer-smelling bees, and additionally, something about a rat study that proves nothing. It's not the same rat study that Justin is talking about on today's show. So
Yeah, mine's not a rat study. Mine's just they killed a bunch of rats. Or they want to. I guess they haven't done it yet.
I like rats. I do. Except, I mean, everything is... It's only a pest when you think it's a pest.
I want to hear about the cancer bees. This is not my favorite story.
Cancer von Beethoven. Sorry, everyone. That was a really weird 90s reference. But anyway, this is a science show, and we are going to jump into the science right now. But as we do, I do want to remind you that we are found at TWIS.org. You can find all of our show notes there. There are links for subscribing to the show. There's also information on the show being published, etc., ways to get in touch with us, all that stuff. But for your knowledge, once again, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And if you look for us anywhere on the web, look for This Week in Science or TWIS. All right, it's time for the science. Are you ready to dive in? Are you?
Let us do it.
Yeah, are you awake, Justin?
I'm getting there. I will be awake halfway through the show. I should wake up completely.
Yeah, so waking up, it's a process, right? It takes a while. Yeah. It's not like all at once.
Some people try to. I'm one of those slow wakers who's got multiple alarms set. I probably wake up an hour earlier than I need to because I need that hour in order to wake up. Does that make any sense to anybody?
It does. It makes sense to me. I need that time also. It's really, you jump out of bed. There you go. I'm ready to go. No, it's hard. But what if you were a black hole?
Oh, well, then I figure I could probably sleep all day. Wait, what?
What? I know. What am I talking about? So, researchers at the European Southern Observatory, which is a radio observatory, it's a land-based telescope that has been observing distant galaxies for a very long time. The Very Large Telescope, which is descriptive as well as defining. Yes. This Very Large Telescope has been checking out for a long time. A galaxy that was far, far away. I mean, I feel like I'm Star Warsing us all of a sudden. And they've been looking at it for several years. 2019, they were like, oh, hey, what's that? It looks like it got brighter. That's interesting. What's going on there? And along the way, they continued to look at this spot, this galaxy that they had been observing. And we're like, oh, hold on a second. Is this black hole? Is it, or not a black, is this a black hole that's waking up? Is this something that's happening that we were not really ready for? What's going on? What are we seeing? And so one of these images that I'm trying to bring up right now. Hello, Blair. Welcome to the show. I will
thank you.
Yay, your microphone works and everything's good. Woot woot. Let's talk about this galaxy. And this galaxy is SDSS 1335 plus 0728.
Bingo. Oh, wait, no.
Catchy. Super catchy. And so they were looking at this area very, very, very far away and going, what is happening over there? It looks like there's brightness. And, to the naked eye, you'd say, what brightness? There is nothing happening there. However, as they zoomed in at these signals that they were receiving at the Very Large Telescope, they confirmed and reconfirmed that there was a spot in space that back in 2019 and over the progressing years has gotten brighter. Started out not doing very much, and then it started getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And this little tiny galaxy is interesting because why would a galaxy start to get brighter? Well, maybe there's some kind of interesting wave-like activity, something that is, causing a change in what we're seeing in space. But you'd think that it would not stay consistent, and this has been consistent, which is not what everybody expected. And so the point here is that we now have this galaxy far, far away that has been increasing in its luminosity. And what researchers from the European Space Southern Observatory think is going on is that it's a black hole waking up. Like we have a supermassive black hole, Sagittarius, a star at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, but it's not luminous. It's got a big field, but at some point in the future, it's going to draw everything in and it'll start eating the dust and the gas and it'll become luminous. And when it does become luminous, what will other species see of our galaxy far, far away? If you could imagine being humans viewing the Milky Way galaxy from very far away, what would be seen? So they don't really know if it's the beginnings of a black hole, but because of the way that it's very consistent in its luminosity and what they are seeing, they are suggesting that it is the awakening of a black hole. That it's just growing in power. It's eating more dust and gas. And as it eats more, that means that the quasar that it creates and the light and energy that it releases is going to increase until it's a consistent bright spot in our sky. And maybe this is the first time that we've ever witnessed this. Kind of fun.
I feel like there's other explanations. Well, like if it's a galaxy, it's got an edge, and that edge is a dirty edge. It's a blind spot. You look at a galaxy from the side, and there's all this dust of the disk, and then all the stuff before you get into this sort of the heart of it. Where even if it's not I think our Milky Way is also brighter towards the center, just because there's a cluster. More clustered stars and things that are closer to the center. But if you picture this thing on the edge, maybe a little bit tilted, kind of like the picture that we have illustrated.
And the pictures that are available, of course, are just artists' impressions.
Exactly.
This is based on data, but at the same time, we don't know.
It's not a picture of that galaxy yet. No. But it's showing it almost from the side of the disk. And so you would see some luminosity from the center. And if it's tilting more, if it's in some sort of trajectory where we've gotten a little bit more of a direct view of the center of it, that could also increase luminosity if it's not getting stuck through the edge dust. Like we can't see out of our edge of our galaxy. We don't know what's there because we can't see because there's a blind spot all the way around the Milky Way where we can't really figure out what's on the other side. So I don't know. It is a waking up black hole eating more stuff. Like that's fascinating. This is going to be a lot of easier explanations.
Yeah, and that they said there could be a really unusually long, slow tidal disruption event where usually there's some aspect of the change that is it changes over time, but it's not this long of a time frame. But who are we as humans to say what a long time frame is? Um, so we don't know. And the researchers are just very excited because according to the data they have and from before 2019 and now, and also our comparisons to other observations of other galaxies, points of light in the night sky, this phenomenon seems to be something that's different. And so that is really the big point of this study. They do believe that, this is researchers. They're probably not like, oh yay, it's a black hole. But the paper that they've presented in Astronomy and Astrophysics is SDSS 1335 plus 0278, the awakening of a kind of 10 to the 6th mass black hole. Kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
So
we all know researchers. They totally went, yay, black hole.
They've looked at all sorts of possibilities and they're like, this is a great, maybe. So this is, it could be a weird supernova. It could be a strange pulsar. It could be all sorts of things. But right now, the going hypothesis, which basically opens it up to scientific questioning, counter testing, debate, which is why science is so awesome, is that it's a black hole. So basically they're like, hey, prove it wrong. So put it out there.
It's so big. Crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. Is it a black hole waking up? I mean, I don't know what a giant looks like when it wakes up in the morning and yawns. I have no idea. But researchers are at the ESO are very, and this is an international consortium of researchers who are excited about this. And it's also, the VLT is Southern Hemisphere. So we're seeing something not from the Northern Hemisphere, which is an interesting view into the sky, which has been disregarded for a very long time, to say the least. Justin, rats.
The report by marine scientists led by researchers at Lancaster University is suggesting that a de-ratification of archipelago islands would have a positive impact on restoring coral reef systems. Rats on the islands were likely introduced there as stowaways on human boats. Once on the islands, the rats have no natural predators, and they have been having really devastating impacts on native seabird populations. Mm-hmm. They eat the eggs, they eat the chicks. Occasionally, they even go after the adult birds. So the study looked at what would happen if we eliminated all of the invasive rats from the island. The team estimates that hundreds of thousands more breeding pairs of seabirds would return to these remote islands.
That seems fair.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And thus revitalizing the local coral reefs. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. The increase in seabirds would equate to nitrogen input from their droppings increasing from
I was going to say, this has to do with poop, for sure. Yeah.
78 tons to 170 tons per year. This would then revitalize local fish populations with a 52% increase in fish biomass on the reefs, or around 50,000 tons more reef fish around the islands. And with this significant increase in fish, there would be more grazing fish, such as parrotfish, doing important jobs, such as eating algae, removing dead coral. And these are roles critical in helping reefs recover from things like bleaching events or big storms, global warming related stuff. So, so rats into coral reef. And what is that important function that coral reefs have again that we always forget about, Blair? They do something important.
Oxygen. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they make most of the
Uh-huh.
oxygen for the planet Earth that we breathe and like to have, so we don't die. Yeah, this is just looking at these 25 islands in the study. If rats were removed from the 25 islands, it would result in populations of lesser noddies, sooty terns, and red-footed boobies, recovering nearly 24,000 breeding pairs, which is an 18-fold increase. And that's just if they got rid of the rats. So then, or maybe once the native vegetation is restored, because the rats have a negative impact on that as well, half the surface area of the lands get back to the way they normally are. Then the breeding pairs would be up to 80,000 pairs or 83,000 pairs. If it got to 3/4 of the islands restored, it would be 280,000 breeding pairs of the lesser noddies, sooty terns, and red-footed boobies. And, of course, then the seabird droppings. The guano carries the nitrogen and phosphorus down into the surrounding seas, fertilizing the surrounding coral reef environments, revitalizing the fish populations. And there's also another interesting cycle on this, is that a lot of the nutrients that the birds would be dropping would actually be caught further out, away from the reefs. So it's not just cycling it back into the reefs from the islands and from the birds, but these birds will tend to go for fish that are further out to sea. So they're actually catching deep sea fish away from the reefs, bringing those nutrients into the reef and island ecosystem. So it actually is reaching out further than the island and bringing more resources into it.
I think that's a really interesting point, is that, we think of everything as like right here, but this is really getting at, that idea of a cycle, right? So it's like these animals, birds, which we think of as flying, air dwelling, but they go and they live on rocks in various places. They put their eggs and they live their lives in these places, and the rats are influencing that. They're diminishing the success of these species. They're diminishing the ability of these species to be able to succeed, right? They're reducing their fitness, because these birds they didn't evolve to really deal with the rats, and humans brought the rats. So we've put invasive species into a place where they are messing up a cycle that these birds are involved in, nitrogen cycling, which is basically like fertilizing the ocean and the coral reefs. But the birds themselves don't immediately get a benefit from that. But when they go out, like, that coral reef is also fostering the environment that they will benefit from. Like, it's all part of it. And then they come
And
back
a lot of
home
coral
and they
reef.
poop.
Yeah, they're
ahead.
in these very clear water spaces, and that means that they're pretty nutrient poor. And that's why the impact of having or not having these birds there to introduce nitrogen into the water is so impactful. And I wanted to share this
That's a huge point.
red-footed booby, because everyone talks
gone
about the
now.
blue-footed booby. That's what you always hear about. And these guys are amazing. They have bright blue bills,
Look at those shoes.
bright red feet. And
Look at those.
I honestly have never heard of them, and they're amazing.
They're beautiful.
Might be my new favorite bird.
Yeah, they're really good.
They're beautiful. Yeah, but from the data, the red-footed boobies are not the most important ones. It's those sooty terns that seem to be.
Oh, yeah.
Was it the sooty or the noddies? Anyway, all of these birds, it doesn't matter. It's a system. It works together. And when we start invading it and messing it up, yay, people. Look what we did. Blair.
I'm blaming this one on the rats. I mean, I get that people were also involved, but I'm still blaming the rats.
The rats wouldn't have gotten there without the people. So anyway.
Yeah.
But they're
speaking of rats,
loving life, eating those eggs and all that stuff. But Blair, you have more rats to talk about.
Yes. And I
they're-
apologize. There's a dog barking outside, and so now my dog is barking. Oh boy. Anyway.
This is good. Dog talk. It's fantastic. We do not do science anymore. It's dog talk.
Hey, rat study proves nothing. This is from James Cook University. That's not what they titled it. That's what I've titled it. And sometimes, you prove the null hypothesis, right? This is looking at photoluminescent fur, which appears in a lot of mammals. And the idea was rats, bandicoots, possums, bats, tree kangaroos, a lot of animals, specifically in Australia and around the world, are photoluminescent. So they glow under ultraviolet, violet, or blue light. Why? We've raised this question many times on this show. Kind of generally a, huh? Is usually where we end up.
Yeah.
And so the aim of this study was to see whether nocturnal vertebrates reacted differently to bluish white photoluminescent fur rather than non-photoluminescent fur. They purchased 36 dead rats. They applied UV protectant hairspray to half of them. And then they fitted the cured pelts to rat-sized models and left them in different outdoor environments. They had then recorded the initial interactions with wildlife on full moon versus new moon nights. They wanted to see if they would be more attracted to the rats that luminesced or not, if the photoluminescent phenomenon was more like a communication method, if other rats came up to them more or less. They wanted to see if it was a camouflage mechanism or maybe it was a warning mechanism. Basically, they were like, does anybody care that they photoluminesce? That's pretty much it.
Because the question is why, right? So why would you do that if nobody cared? But okay, continue. Yes.
Yeah, nobody cared. There was no significant difference in preference for non-photoluminescent versus photoluminescent rat models for any habitat, moon phase, or animal type. There could be a particular survival advantage or disadvantage, but so far the mystery continues. So I just thought it was really funny that this was a study that fully made its way into a journal. Somebody probably got their PhD this way, and they put the null hypothesis, which is still important. They still identified that certain things are not true.
I think that's really important. This is what we talk about all the time. We need to publish those. It didn't work. Yeah. Okay, now move on to new hypotheses. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm a terrible listener. What were the other creatures involved? Because
good thing you're on a science talk show, Justin.
Well, no, because I got lost in thinking about this while you were talking about it. Were there any what I want to see is I want to see raptors. I want to see birds of prey are what.
I mean, nobody tried to take them, so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah,
nobody tried to
because their hair looked too good,
more or less. I mean, who knows? Maybe because they were dead already, they didn't smell alive or act alive or move, and so nobody cared for that reason. Who knows?
Yeah. And there's an image here where they have these rat models covered in rat fur with strings around their feet to pull them, being investigated by another animal.
Yeah, and make them move and look very realistic.
But I mean, there's one thing with putting a carrot on a string and dragging a carrot around, but if another animal knows how an animal moves, they're going to be like, "You're moving backwards. When did you learn how to do the moonwalk?" It's suspicious, but yeah. Okay, so I think you're right. Yeah, rat study opens up more questions than answers, actually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as Kevin Reardon in the chat is saying, rat raves. Yes. Maybe that's really just blacklight parties. That's what they're into. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Who knows? All right, moving on from all rats to some talk about discovery in our immune system. Did you know you have an army of healers inside of you? There's been a question as to how regulatory T cells work. Are there multiple populations of these cells in every organ system throughout the body that work independently and react to inflammatory signals? Or is there basically one big army that gets its marching orders whenever something somewhere in the body gets inflamed? Researchers at Cambridge, University of Cambridge, have just published a study in the journal Immunity this last week, analyzing regulatory T cells present in 48 different body tissues in mice, not in humans, but they determined in mice, which are fairly closely related to us, that the cells are not specialized to organ systems. They don't stay in one place. They move around, and actually they go where they're needed. The researchers say it's difficult to think of a disease, injury, or infection that doesn't involve some kind of immune response, and our finding really changes the way we could control this response. Now that we know that these regulatory T cells are present everywhere in the body, well, and they can move anywhere in the body, in principle, we can start to make immune suppression and tissue regeneration treatments that are targeted against a single organ, which would be a vast improvement on current treatments that are hitting the body with a sledgehammer, basically. So in this study, they've shown in mice it's possible to attract these T cells to certain parts of the body, make sure there's a lot of them there, and then get the immune response turned off so that healing starts. And so the idea is that potentially by understanding how these regulatory T cells work and what they respond to, that in situations where you have overactive immune responses, so like the flu or COVID or autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis or lupus, that instead of giving somebody just a drug that turns down their immune system entirely and makes them potentially susceptible to all sorts of viruses, infections, etc., that it could be, we could use this understanding to target the immune treatments for whatever immune response we're dealing with. So they are fundraising now after this study to set up a spin-out company, and they want to run clinical trials to test their findings in humans in the next few years. So yeah,
that was like the damaging, deadly part of COVID was from our own T cells, our own killer T cells going in there and being sort of unregulated. I think they were getting recruited by B cells, and then there's usually a response that takes place that says, "Okay, that's enough. Back off. Go somewhere else. We've done enough fixing here," and that was sort of downregulated. So if we can actually get tissue specific control over targeting T cell activities,
yep,
and turning it off again,
yes, and that is exactly what they are looking at.
That is huge.
Yeah. So that's the idea, is that we have a new understanding of this aspect of the immune system. I mean, the immune system is very complicated. There's all sorts of stuff going into it, but any little bit helps. Speaking of the immune system, let's talk bird flu. Wah, wah.
Well, we're calling it bird flu right now. Soon we could be calling it cat flu, because the University of Maryland Review of Scientific Literature suggests that the biggest threat from bird flu is cats. Whoa. They are contracting this rapidly evolving H5N1, potentially putting owners and veterinarians at risk. I think this was written by veterinarians. It's the only time anybody ever mentions the threat to veterinarians is researchers who
Oh, geez.
for veterinarians. The study is still waiting peer review, but what it did was it examined the global distribution and spread of bird flu infections in feline species between 2004 and 2024, finding a drastic rise in reports starting in 2023, with a spike in infections reported amongst domestic cats. So this isn't wild zoo, this is the pets. The increase coincides with the rapid spread of the current strain of H5N1 amongst other mammals, says the study's first author, Assistant Professor Kristen Coleman, who is an airborne infectious disease researcher at the School of Public Health. Bird flu has not yet been reported to be contagious between humans, so no human-to-human transfer. However, the disease is clearly changing as it's now starting to reach into animals that have never been affected before. And pets are super concerning. And the reason, of course, is why would pets be concerning, Blair? Why would pets be concerning, Kiki?
Because people touch them and spend time with them and breathe their air.
So, like, people have some contact with, like, the cows, right? The cattle that have been getting infected. But, you don't, like, have an infected cattle crawling up the back of the couch, sitting in your lap and wanting to be petted. So
or sitting directly on your face in the morning to wake you up. Yeah.
So the concern that this can become pet-borne is that gives the virus a lot more human interaction, and
but they're not sick, right? They're not making the cats sick. The cats are just carrying.
Oh, they are.
Right?
No, they are.
Oh, okay.
They are. So
basically, if your cat is sick, you should take it to the vet, who might be concerned.
So there's dairy cattle in 12 states that have been contracted bird flu, and that has been identified now. In a lot of these, have been previously anecdotal reports of farm cat deaths, like lots of farm cats dying.
Yeah.
The U.S. Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, which provides guidance for veterinarians working with potentially infected animals, still is saying that the risk of contracting diseases from pets is low. But that the assessment is based on what's happened so far, right? Like they will change that to high as soon as a human gets it from their cat. Like this is how those assessments work. So they have a couple things. Don't feed your cat raw milk or raw dairy milk, and make sure that your cats don't have supervised time outdoors. So
unsupervised time outdoors.
Or unsupervised outdoors.
Supervised time might be fine.
Who can watch a cat? Who can watch a cat? Really? Who can supervise a cat?
You can have a catio. You can have a cat on a leash. There are ways to supervise your cat and have them outside.
Okay, so keep your cat away from birds. Also, it turns out that house mice can also carry the virus. So also keep them away from mice. Yeah. So what they said though,
no cats, no mice, no cows, no birds. Basically, this is the farm cat situation. Is that you have farm cats? They're the bigger ones who can go out and kill the rodents, and they keep the rodent population under control very often on the farms and the ranches.
That's their job.
And that's their job. They're not house pets. Their job is to work and control the population. But at the same time, they are interacting with the rodents that are coming into contact with the excrement of the bovines that have gotten into contact through the grass or whatever with the birds who have come in during migration season. It is a whole situation.
But this is
cats also kill a lot of birds. So
yes, they do.
And just to be fair, this is not a study on farm cats.
No.
This is talking about domestic cats. This is talking about the home or the cat that goes outside, wanders around, and then comes back in and you feed it.
That's
It
great.
says
But I
that
mean, part of the results, they're looking at a number of these avian influenza infections in felines. One of the results is including pantherinae. That's not house cat.
Isn't that mountain lions?
Yeah, you panthers, pantherinae.
well, but
That's
that's
not your typical house cat. Just gonna say.
correct. But that's not in the United States. They're not looking at mountain lions in the United States. That data is also from Asia samples. But here's the thing:
Yeah.
they say that cat owners should be watching for respiratory or neurological symptoms in their cats. What would a neurological symptom in a cat? They're already insane. Consider taking
Justin,
them to
come
the vet.
on.
Please.
Know if your house cat is acting strangely.
Cats are constantly hallucinating things. Like, I'm sorry.
Yes, they are. But if your cat is normally acting a particular way and then they start acting suddenly a different way, or having
Take
seizures,
them to the
or
vet
can't
if they
see
seem
and
to be
become
having.
blind or deaf, suddenly
Yeah.
that's not good.
Yeah, it's H5N1 is reportedly causing blindness in cats as a symptom, as well as trouble breathing.
Awful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Poor
just
kitties, poor everything.
if you just needed one more reason why it's not a great idea to keep a cat in the household, and Toxoplasma gondii infections didn't work.
Keep your cat inside.
Maybe this will.
If you keep your cat inside, they're not going to come in contact with the cows
Or birds.
or birds.
Or maybe a house mouse.
Poor
Yeah, well,
house
if
mouse.
that was the only way, I think numbers would be much lower.
Yeah. How would you come in contact with hepatitis E?
Which one is E? How many of them are there?
I swear.
There's so many.
Yeah,
I've heard of like A and B like before.
A, B,
and
C.
maybe a
C,
like-
C will eat your brain. You can get that for
Oh.
monkeys. That's really dangerous.
Right. So these are viral
I
hepatitis.
didn't ever know there was a D. Now we're
so
already
you
at E.
You can have a hepatitis that is related to just bad life choices. Hepatitis is generally defined as disease of the liver. But you can have viral hepatitis. Viral hepatitis A and E are often caused by poor sanitary conditions. B, C, D are with food very often. So I think maybe I'm getting it confused again, but there are differences in how
One
they're
of them.
transmitted.
Yeah.
A and B have vaccines, the others do not. So, hepatitis E, it's one of the top 5 causes of viral hepatitis. And it's prevalent in places where sanitation is poor for a large part. But a big question has been, wow, okay, for some reason it seems to be in the pig populations in the United States. Our ranched pigs seem to have a lot of hepatitis E. And so it's an issue with the husbandry of those animals that we use for food here in the United States. So the researchers are like, what is going on here with the pigs and the hepatitis? And so they started looking into it, and they're also like, this is interesting. Seems like hepatitis E also there's some suggestions it might tie itself into sperm and impact fertility. And so, because it's impacting pigs, and pigs are a really good model for humans, and it's like all this stuff going on, they're like, what's happening? And the researchers at Ohio State University basically did a study looking at infectiousness in pigs. They gave hepatitis E to a bunch of pigs, looked at their sperm, looked at the liver cells, looked at how the hepatitis E infected other human cells. Long story short, hepatitis E may be a sexually transmitted virus. They don't know whether it gets itself into the sperm capsid or whether it just attaches like a rider, like a horseback rider. But the sperm that have a hepatitis E attached to them some way, they don't do very well. And so it's a big question, because hepatitis E tends to cause a loss of offspring in about, or miscarriages in about 50% of the births that it is involved in. So the point they're bringing up now is like, okay, male partner with some sexual dysfunction, female partner, miscarriages. If the female partner tests positive for hepatitis E, because usually you're testing the woman as they're pregnant and the miscarriages are happening, go look at the man and their sperms, because the spermatids and the sperm and how that's all working, because hepatitis E may be really involved in a decline in fertility. And it gets destroyed when you cook meat. So it's not coming from eating pig products, just so you know.
Okay. So the more important question that I've been trying to figure out how to say. Do humans also get hepatitis E?
Yes, that's what I was saying, is that we do. It's more often in places where there are unsanitary conditions. But there is an endemic situation among pigs here in the United States that we're not talking about.
So I guess the two questions are: who had it first,
Mm.
and is it exclusively a sexually transmitted disease?
No, but that is one of the possible routes of infection. So if there is, number one, pig people who are raising pigs and you're using artificial insemination for your swine, make sure you're testing them for hepatitis E, because that might be leading to a decrease in your pig fertility. Second point is,
I'm sure our hog farmer listening audience is very, very concerned with that. Well, the other part of the audience still wants to know: did humans get this virus?
Nope, not asking that question. I'm not asking that question, but there is a potential for between 20 to 50 documented male infertility cases. Maybe we should screen them for hepatitis E, because maybe that's something involved. Don't know how. We're not going to say where that came from.
So a human with hepatitis E, do they have other symptoms besides infertility?
There should be. I mean, hepatitis can be carried, and that is a big aspect of why it is so prevalent in the pig populations, the swine populations in the United States, is that very often it is carried and there is no outward sign of infection.
Asymptomatic, yeah.
Yeah, and so if
so this would be a reason to maybe start looking at vaccines or other sorts of treatments, because especially if it's an asymptomatic spread, then you want to be able to stop that in kind of silent populations where things are spreading because there's no other symptoms.
Yep.
And I'm getting a whole bunch of feedback from our hog farmer demographic, which is much larger than I thought it was, of hog farmers who are listening live to the show. And they're telling me, just drop it. Okay.
Just drop it. Okay, we'll drop it. We'll not talk about it. Just make sure, take care of yourselves, y'all. It's an interesting question. Another question related to what might be impacting infertility and dysfunction in the land of man is microplastics. There have been a few studies recently looking at microplastics, finding them in testes and semen. We have found them in the placenta. We found them in embryos. We're finding microplastics everywhere. Most recent study that was just published in Nature, and it's a Nature Communications paper. Microplastics were detected in the human penis. A number of men, this is IJIR, your sexual medicine journal, so it's not like one of the big Nature ones, but it's not a huge sample size either. 5 men undergoing surgery for inflatable penile prostheses were tissue sampled, and then they looked at those samples and found microplastics. Correlation, not causation, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe now that we have found microplastics in the male genitalia, perhaps it will be something that humanity decides to take care of.
When you say it's in the tissue,
Yes.
I'm just having trouble figuring out how microplastics get there.
Yeah. So,
Assume on the way out.
no, I mean, it's a big question. All these tissues, how do microplastics get there? Why do they get there? What's going on? If microplastics are
Because you're
getting
not
carried
talking about like
along, yeah.
in the urethra where urine exits because you're digesting,
Mm.
like you can almost kind of think, but just in the actual tissue, I'm really having trouble understanding the mechanism of how it would get in there.
That's why I said correlation does not equal causation, and I don't understand any of this. I mean, blood flow is the big one, and if we're,
Right.
blood is engorging the male
Okay.
genitalia,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so there
All right.
are small vessels that would take little particles, and those particles could potentially get stuck.
How do plastics get in the blood, though?
Because we breathe them, we eat them. Are you microwaving things in plastic? I
Right.
grew up
So-
microwaving things in plastic. Microwaves,
So it's
plastic?
how-
What?
Yeah.
It's how micro them we are talking about is something that can get past,
Yeah.
get into the bloodstream through breathing, through the gut wall. Probably the
Right.
gut
Yeah,
wall
it's
is
just
probably
so
a big
tiny.
one.
Mhm.
And then if it's these micro, and I'm assuming very micro, we're not talking about
Yes. Very,
chunks of
very small.
plastic, right? In the digestive system,
Yeah, it makes
you
more
get
sense
through
if you
that
think
gut wall.
about like breathing in plastic. But when I think about the digestive system, there's, at least in theory, some kind of separation
Mhm.
from like the circulatory system and the digestive system.
No, they're totally bound together. Like the circulation comes in, and like that's the circulatory system comes in and grabs all the little bits and pieces that have been digested that can be used
So-
and carries them around to places that need things
Mhm.
to be built. And
And
Yeah, but I
neither-
think
neither-
Justin's
neither
point is the
system-
part that I need to remind myself of is how micro we're talking.
Yeah, and neither of those
Because
systems
you think
are
about microplastics,
designed-
we talk about like microplastics in the ocean. Those are much larger than the microplastics that are in our body.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Neither of
We
the
should be
systems
saying
that-
like
in the lungs
nanoplastics,
of the
maybe.
gut
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
are designed to prevent intrusion from
Yeah.
microplastics. Like
Yeah.
this is not how it's not how the system was evolved.
Right.
So it kind of just walks on through. I think like
Yeah,
are
they're
they
looking
supposed
at-
to? Can I check your tach? No. Oh, well,
Yeah, so they're
going.
looking, they used a Agilent 8700 laser direct infrared chemical imaging system and used a Zeiss Merlin scanning electron microscope to check out these particles. And 80% of the samples range in size from 20 to 500 microns. 7 types of these microplastics
bigger
were
than I thought.
polyethylene terephthalate, PET, and polypropylene. So the question is
Kind of bigger than I
is
thought.
this part of what's impacting declining fertility rates? Is this part of what's impacting fertility or dysfunction? Who knows? We don't know. We don't have that answer yet, but it is now probably something that will get fixed at this point in time.
Are fertility rates declining? Is that a thing? I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Well, but there's also this whole thing where the current generation is reproducing later. So
Yeah, because nobody owns a home, so nobody feels safe. Their jobs are all.
so there's
gig
also
work,
that, like
and
at least
nobody owns
in
a
the
home.
United States,
Yeah.
Let's
rates
put
are
it all
dropping, but
together.
that could
economic
also be because of all these other
instability. I think is
social
much
dynamics
more.
as well, right? Yes.
Totally.
Social
Not
dynamics,
necessarily medical. Yeah.
contraception, female
Two
education.
incomes to afford an apartment.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
Stop
Also,
it.
like reduction in reproductive freedoms, making people not even want to try.
fear of the future.
That'll
Yeah.
be
Anyway. Oh my
Anyway.
goodness. Hey, love to leave this first part of the show on a really happy note. Hope all your parts are whole and not full of plastics. I'm a plastic girl in a plastic world. Made of This Week in Science. Thank you for joining us. And if you love the show, please share it with your friends, people you don't want full of plastics, people that you think would enjoy this conversation that doesn't give you answers, doesn't tell you how to live your life, but only gives you more questions. That's what we do here. We ask more questions. Head over to twist.org, click on the Zazzle link if you'd like to take a look at our merchandise and help keep the show going by purchasing some of the products that have been created over the years, mostly using Blair's amazing artistic ability. And additionally, if you go and click on the Patreon link at twist.org, you can support us in an ongoing fashion, $10 and more per month. We will thank you by name at the end of the show. There's more there. But honestly, everything that you do, from sharing twists to financially, your help, your being here in the chat room, you're being part of this. Thank you for your support. We can't do it without you. All right, it's 9:05 here, and I was thinking that since Justin has a heart out, he should throw his story in, but he's going to run away, and he's not here right now. So apparently, we are just going to go straight to it's time for that wonderful part of the show that we know and love as Blair's Animal Corner with Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. There's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
You know the ancient saying,
Do
you
I?
have time to lean, you have time to clean. Well, cichlid fish think something very similar. They actually motivate workers in their society via punishment.
Oh,
So,
what?
yes, this is a study out of Osaka Metropolitan University. They have demonstrated that cichlids employ physical punishment to elicit helping efforts from their offspring and other subordinate members of their fish society, indicating advanced societal and cognitive skills that, heretofore has previously only been seen in higher level vertebrates, whatever that means. Anyway, humans have often used punishment to promote cooperation, maintain social order. In many situations, we now know that is not the best way to motivate us humans, and there are other ways to motivate us, but at least for these fish, the cichlid fish, they have found that they use punishment to encourage cooperative behavior. So they have subordinates or helpers that assist dominant breeders in defending territory, maintaining breeding shelters, helping raise young, all these things. And so by observing their behavior in a laboratory setting, they were able to manipulate and measure the effects of punishment on helping behavior. They found that the dominant breeders would physically attack idle helpers, including their own offspring, to promote them to cooperate and help in activities. And so those who experienced such aggression, they would increase their efforts. They would help right away. But in contrast, helpers who engaged all the time proactively did not get beat up, basically. So they do, in fact, appear to use physical punishment to elicit cooperative behaviors in a group setting. And so, of course, this proves that punishment is not exclusive to human societies. Duh. But it also just shows another method of cooperative behavior. Sure. Fish, like humans, employ advanced cognitive abilities to sustain their society, said one of the lead researchers. This compels us to reconsider the notion of intelligence, not only in fish, but across the animal kingdom. So, interesting that they're equating this with intelligence. Not sure I would make that leap, but it is interesting that fish, which, we understand they live in societies, they work cooperatively, that they might use physical punishment. I think it's more of a language question. Are they able to kind of are they able to portray something more subtly, or do they need the big stick? And in this case, they need a big stick to get their point across.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
You're muted, Kiki.
It's a form of
Thanks, go ahead.
communication. It is a form of communication. Like if you look across the animal kingdom, the one that jumped out to me right away in this is when wolves are doing dominating things to get when the pack leader is dominating the other wolves to get them sort of in line and to reestablish the hierarchy and that sort of thing. This happens in the ape world, of course. It's actually pretty common in the animal kingdom to have some sort of like aggressive physical interaction to get the group in line. It's amazing that it's been with us since fish.
Probably since before.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Although I will say, Justin, a topic for another day, there's really no such thing as an alpha male in wolf society. That is a weird thing that is perpetrated through human society. So we need to talk about that more later.
Wait a second.
In a future mini-sode or after show, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we have
totally
to, because
been blown
that's
out of proportion and pushed into this weird alpha male thing.
But
in human
isn't there
society. It's a mess. But anyway.
But wait a second. Now we have to talk about this now. Isn't there like a breeding pair and then there were others? Like, haven't we studied wolves to the point where we know that there's an alpha pair?
In fact, the lead researcher on wolves in the United States regrets his initial paper on alpha male behavior.
Really?
Because it has completely ruined wolf studies and has permeated into human culture, into what an alpha male is in this really silly situation. I'll share some stuff on social media if anyone's interested. Find me on, Facebook or Instagram or Threads. I don't know.
Wherever.
And I'll share some stuff out later.
But toxic masculinity
ultimately,
alpha males.
There
males.
are power dynamics in animal society.
Yes.
I will give you that. And there can be dominant and submissive individuals in a society. And we have seen this behavior permeate throughout the animal kingdom. This is not that surprising. I love that this is like kind of specific. Hey, stop messing around.
Horses?
Help out. Do your chores.
Do your chores. I think that, parents everywhere. Help. Be a part of this. If you're not helping, what are you doing?
Corporal punishment does not work. But with cichlids, it appears to work.
What I think is interesting and could be looked at more from this is the genetic underpinning of the different behaviors of helpers versus not helpers. Is there a type, and how do those different individuals do as they grow up and they go into breeding, or they become the ones that get mates and kids, and how does that work out? So I think the whole understanding of this cycle would be really interesting in terms of a cichlid socio-psychological study. Justin, do you have to head out?
Yeah.
I've got 5 more minutes.
So he really wants to hear about Cancer von Beethoven.
Cancer bees. Let's talk about it. And I thought about this because we've talked about COVID sniffing dogs before on the show, and dogs have been able to sniff out lots of disease. But this is a new study out of Michigan State University looking at the fact that honeybees can detect the biomarkers or chemical concentrations associated with lung cancer in human breath. So honeybees can
What?
sniff out cancer. Yes. So they wanted to see if they could distinguish the specific chemicals. So they actually created a synthetic recipe for human breath that had 6 compounds that all related to the chemical makeup of the breath of someone with lung cancer. So they were able to make the synthetic cancer breath, and then they made a synthetic healthy breath mixture. Yes.
Okay.
And then they used 20 bees, so a pretty small sample size, but a very cool start. And they used a 3D printed harness to hold a live honeybee while they attached a tiny electrode to their brain to measure changes in their brain signals. So this isn't just like,
Understanding, yeah, so these bees have the ability to sniff out, quote unquote, the chemicals, olfactory chemicals in the air. That, yeah, and so they're not sniffing it. It's just
right.
it's hitting their
They're
hitting their
sensing the chemicals.
they're sensing it, and yeah, they're like little. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but they're not just, the researchers aren't just going like, oh, when the bee acts like this, they smell cancer. No, they were measuring, if you want to call it a brain, it's really just a glob of neurons, but like their brain activity. And they were able to figure out that their brain reacted differently to cancer versus no cancer in the breath. And so they recorded the neural signals. They were able to see a change in their neural firing response in relation to the cancer compounds. They were able to detect increasingly smaller concentrations in this study until it was just so small that they were sure, yes, these markers of cancer are indeed being responded to in the specific way in the bee brain. And so they could differentiate between very tiny changes in the chemical concentrations, equivalent to about parts per 1 billion, 1 part per 1 billion.
That's
of a
fair.
change.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of pollen or other odorants, pheromones that are in the air as they talk to each other in the hive or other places, there's all sorts of things that they probably are reacting to at that tiny scale. But how
Yeah.
are they going to use this? What are they doing?
Yes. So then they were able to make a honeybee brain-based sensor. So basically they were able to mimic what was happening in this nerve glob, aka bee brain. So they were able to mimic that into this sensor that could effectively distinguish between small cell lung cancer, non-small lung cancer cells, and healthy cells. So a tiny bit of cancer, a lot bit of cancer, healthy. So they were able to find a way where if this was scalable, you could go to the doctor and part of your general checkup, you'd breathe into a little tube and they could go, oh, we're picking up maybe small trace amounts of cancer. Let's test your body. You could find it crazy early because it's not invasive. It wouldn't cost a lot of money. You wouldn't have to go in searching for cancer because you thought maybe you have cancer. This could just be a very easy, like, breathe into this little tube after you step on the scale and then you give some blood, and you could catch things just so early and so easily, all because of bees.
I love that.
So this is the problem I'm having with this study.
Yes.
So this already exists to some degree. There are tests where you will breathe into a thing that are looking for cancer, looking for the volatile.
Right.
Like this is already because part of this was like, oh well, yeah, they could use this as a breath test for cancer, but they already can, if they're already at the point where they can know what compounds that they are expressed by lungs that are in the throes of cancer, and then are making sure that the bees can smell that and then detecting it in their brainwaves. Why don't we have a detector for this? And I looked it up and like, oh yeah, they've developed a few. So if we already have the sensor,
Great question.
Why do we have the bees doing this and then the answer might be, I don't know. I don't know why, but because it's sort of like, wait, if we could do that, why can't we just have a sensor that could detect cancer? And then, but we already do, and that's
But
why
now,
we knew we could run this experiment to see if the bees were sensitive enough to also pick it up. And so,
but
yeah,
maybe
they
this
can.
is more sensitive. Maybe what
Yeah,
this
that's what I'm
is
wondering
that,
too, if it's a parts per billion issue.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so, and being able to have a mixed breath sample, and what they said is they have an 82% classification success rate in their study, that it is sensitive and potentially what it does. So they're mixtures at concentration ranges relevant to biomarkers in human breath from parts per billion to parts per trillion. And so that is probably the difference in sensitivity. And what they're doing is increasing the resolution of those tests.
I feel like we could be
Maybe
doing that with technology, but
would
maybe next time you go in for your checkup, they're gonna be like, all right, we just need you to breathe into this bee real quick,
Yeah.
and we're gonna monitor its brain. We
Well,
can
I
try
think
to
that
invent a
also might have
sensor,
something to
but
do
we
with it.
just
Is I wonder if it's more scalable or cheaper because it's based on a bee brain, because bee brains are pretty simple.
I'm going to guess it's not the bee brain. I'm going to guess it is the sensors. So the chemical and what they say here in their introduction, e-noses, like email, but e-noses are usually targeted for specific chemicals, and these engineered sensors can't match the broad sensitivity and specificity of biological chemical sensors. So honeybee antennae and olfactory brain are really sensitive, and this allows them to be able to detect different volatile organic compounds that we might be wanting to look at in a more sensitive and relevant way. So I think what we're looking at is an improvement in what is already out there, that it's already there, but they're trying to use this really sensitive biological system to improve the way that we, move forward.
Yeah.
bee-based technology.
I hope that you will be following this work. I mean, it's got a lot of buzz, or it might, now that we're talking about it.
Oh, the time.
You gotta
hey,
go.
everybody, I gotta go, but I'll see you next week.
Have a great week, Justin. See you next week. Go make your train. All right. Moving on from these sensors to city centaurs. I have a couple of more studies just to read out very quickly. Researchers just publishing in 50i Science. It's open access in case you want to take a look at it. If you like birds a lot, researchers looked at different urban densities, and they were able to show that the denser the space, the more boring the birds. Basically, the denser the city, the less genetic diversity. Birds live with us. They live in our city centers. They live around us. If you live in a dense urban center, you're probably very aware of the common house sparrow, pigeon, and I don't. Maybe you have crows. Occasionally, maybe you have a peregrine falcon or two. I don't know. But really, it's very limited in terms of the birds that you get in the dense city centers. And this study suggests that there is a real influence on the genetic diversity of not just the bird species, but like within the birds themselves. So they are adapting to like not have to adapt. The denser the city space, the more available all sorts of stuff is: shelter, food, water, and they're de-diversifying themselves.
Does
in the
that just mean
denser
like a
areas.
narrow band of genetic markers are the most successful in an urban cityscape?
I mean, that's another way to look at it. Yeah, that there is a narrowing of the ones that are really successful, but it's also, the idea that having more diversity will allow you to be more resilient in times of
Mm,
change. And so there is a question as to because of the density of human structures and humanity in these spaces, that perhaps what's happening is the environments are so static for the animals themselves that they don't need extra stuff anymore.
mhm.
But maybe that just means they're more specialized, right?
Or also that it's such a different environment from non-urban space that new genes don't come into the city
Right.
also,
That's the
right?
country mouse and the city mouse. Maybe
Right,
that could be.
exactly, yeah, it's like a barrier against new genetics moving in.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So it's
Mm.
like an island population almost
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
way. Yeah. And if you think about it, I mean, I don't know how they haven't looked at it in like a very, very precise resolution manner, but like, block by block or city area by city area. But, maybe there is a specialization and, definite like island populations, even within a place like New York City or others where there's high density, but like different areas are kind of ecologically, morphologically
Mhm.
different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, those who say humans have no impact on the world. What?
Who said that?
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, high density. Dudes. It's high density, man. My last study for the night. I know it's getting later and later, and your arousal is dwindling, especially those of you in different time zones. Maybe you're getting more sleepy, just kind of chilling out. But what if you were in an fMRI machine? Blair, have you ever done
Well,
an
either you'd
fMRI
fall
study?
asleep,
Yeah.
yeah, or you'd be stressed out of your mind the whole time. Those are the 2 options, right? Because you got the grinding sound and the close quarters, yeah.
Mhm. Right. So, but at the same time, it's close quarters and it's warm, and maybe the task you're doing, maybe you don't have to do anything. Maybe just lying there. And researchers just publishing this last week in Nature Human Behavior have taken a look at what they call the illusory connection between what they think is people actually their brains actually becoming more dynamic as you're in the fMRI, and the reality of people just really just kind of falling asleep. And so they suggest that there is a false positive that exists because there is a conflation of how the brain is mapped and the signals of low frequency oscillation and blood flow during this scanning. And it's not addressed by standard denoising procedures, and that the cerebral blood flow and respiration and heart rate changes that happen during scanning when people are not stressed out the entire time, going the other way around. It's diminishing arousal. And that diminishing arousal, scientists have been like, oh my gosh, look at that oxygen signal. The brain's getting excited. The brain's doing stuff. Oh my gosh. But really, no, people are falling asleep.
So what you're saying is that the baseline that everyone's measured against in an MRI is tainted, basically, by people falling asleep in there?
Not always, but kind of. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, yes. Not for every study, of course, but they have added this new denoising procedure that basically gets rid of this artifact of what is considered functional connectivity when in fact it is a change in blood flow and oxygen because people are bored and they're kind of going into a sleepy state. So,
Yep.
yeah. So they have a new procedure. They've worked on it and verified it, and they have determined that there's a whole bunch of studies that have probably been vulnerable to this kind of noise. Not all of them. The ones that you really don't want to, if people are just going in for a single scan to look at like how a stroke has affected their brain or other things, potentially they're going to be missing stuff because the brain isn't acting the way that the researchers think it is because people are just kind of getting tired. The other one is, how does mental illness affect neurological function? And if we're looking at blood flow, oxygen in the brain, and saying that correlates to how the brain's acting and neuronal activity, it can change stuff. The lower arousal can actually change the way that the brain is connected and might be leading to something to be misinterpreted. Yeah. This is from the National Institute on Drug Abuse Intramural Research Program, and basically they were looking at the tendency of people's arousal to wane over the course of brain scans. And it happens. It really does.
So do you
Even
make
with
them
the
more unpleasant or less unpleasant? Because I feel like part of it is that it is so unpleasant that people just shut down, right?
It's
It's just
unpleasant.
easier to kind of like, ugh.
I guess, but it's like do you have to pay attention? Are you just lying there? What are you doing? Eventually you
Right.
you just put the noise away somewhere and you hide in a
Uh-huh.
place in your brain away from all of it.
Exactly. And that's how you fall asleep.
Yes. Yeah.
So do they need to make it
They need pointy sticks.
less unpleasant? I'm thinking less unpleasant, like play a book on tape or
Yeah, something that that keeps
like a
arousal up.
fun visual on the inside, like project something fun on the inside of the MRI machine.
Pointy sticks. This is an opportunity for scientists to poke people for science.
Oh man. I don't know about that. People already don't want to do MRIs. Don't make it worse.
Yeah, don't make it worse. No. I'm just joking, everybody. But I feel like people who are working in this area, this is something that hopefully they'll look at to see whether or not their data has been affected by this, whether they can denoise things and check whether there's something that can, whether we can go back and look at stuff and moving forward, take advantage of this. Yeah. Brian P. is saying, I think there's a good number of patients that get anti-anxiety meds prior to a scan. And that also could make you,
Oh yeah.
depending on why you're doing it or what, that could impact results a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe make you a little sleepy. Yeah. Anyway, oh my goodness. So many things to take into account in this world.
Yeah, difficult to control variables on humans overall. They don't live in a lab, so
yeah. I mean, seriously, this whole life is an experiment. Welcome to Science Project Earth.
yeah, I mean, I guess the whole planet's a lab, right? Yeah, it kind of, I don't know.
It depends. I mean, it's the mice that are taking all the notes, right? And we'll see where it goes. Did you bring your towel? I always have a towel. You need to make sure.
Always.
Always. Blair, I'm glad you made
Yes.
it this week. Did we finish our stories?
Oh, that's all I have.
Oh, the Beatles. Did you read about the Beatles this week?
Oh, I read. I did, and I forgot what it was. I did. I got excited, and then I forgot because it was about why they outnumber all other life on this planet.
It's chemicals. They learned how to use their
Right.
thorax to make a chemical and squirt it at predators, and then because of that, they were like, "Oh, I can diversify and have lots of chemicals and do lots of things." And then they were studying some of these beetles, and they're like, "Oh, okay, beetles, got the chemicals. They're going to control the lice that they like to control." I think it was lice, whatever, or mites, whatever. They were using the chemicals to like go, "Hey, trust us, do what we tell you," like whatever. So they were mind controlling those little ones. And then they were mind controlling ants and like invading ant colonies and just being like, chemicals, and like, I'm going to live among you and you're going to like me. And then the ants were like, okay. And they didn't want to get the chemicals squirted at them anymore. So that was fine. And then they found another species that had actually stopped producing all of the genes and modifications to actually, they couldn't actually create the chemical anymore because they had conned the ants, and the ants the ants trusted them, and they lived with the ants now. And so they didn't have to create the chemical.
What?
So there's like a whole other species who's like evolved beyond the use of chemical manipulation and just lives with the ants now. Anyway.
See, we just live on a beetle planet is the thing. There's what did the article say? There's 400,000 described species of beetles on this planet. And I don't remember exactly what the exact quote is, but I think by biomass, there's more biomass of beetles than anything else on the planet. This is beetle planet with some humans, basically. This is beetle planet with some vertebrates.
We all live in some version of Beetlejuice.
Yes, exactly. Man, and so it's the chemicals. We're just working for beetles. Didn't you know? They're controlling
that's really the thing. We think we're so smart and on top of it, but I think there's a lot that came before us who might be controlling us. Thank goodness. Oh gosh, do you have a fungus? Anyway, who knows? The fungus are among us, everyone. Blair, have we done it? I think we did it.
We've done it.
Okay, on our way out tonight, I'm going to do the things. Blair, you get to be Justin in the outro. We're going to, yeah. I want to say,
then you're going to be me.
Yes, I'm going to be you. Okay. You be Justin. We're going to, we'll say it go.
Not confusing at all. Got it.
Nope. Yeah, it's all good. Everybody who is here right now, thank you for joining us. We really, really appreciate your presence and your attention and your questions and comments. Thank you for all of this. Thank you to people who have been a part of making this show happen. Fada, thank you for the show notes and social media. So important to what we're doing. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. Everyone in the chat rooms, thanks for being here. Gord, Arnlor, others who help keep the chat rooms nice places. Thank you for keeping it real, keeping it nice. We like curiosity and respectfulness. And Rachel, thank you so much for editing the show. We love that you do that every week for us for the podcast. And now it's time for me to say thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Adam, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Corris, Biel Verazarb, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Bigard Chefstad, Donathan Styles, aka Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan Shoebrew, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, PIG, Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swasson, Fredis 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, aka Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Philip Shing, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Knapp, Lon Makes, EO, Adam Mishkan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you once again for supporting us on Patreon. And if you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, head over to TWIS.org, click on the Patreon link. That'll take you to the Patreon community where you can choose your level of support. Can't wait to read your name at the end of the show. And on next week's show, we will be back
on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, broadcasting live from Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook.
And if you want to listen to us as a podcast, just search for This Week in Science. All the good places that podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe too.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for our newsletter.
Woo! We might do that someday. And we love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address or a suggestion for an interview, please let us know somewhere in social media. We might be there, or just send us an email. And Blair, why should they put TWIS in the subject line?
Oh, if you don't put TWIS in the subject line, then it will get sent on a rocket deep into space where there is a hungry black hole waking up that will gobble it up. So we will never read it.
This sounds like a baby bedtime story, Blair. You need to write that. Let's do it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, finish it up.
We look forward to discussing science with you again next week. And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.